Cool. So moving on to topic 2, which is the constraints-led approach for mini basketball. Now, use of constraints, there's the 3 types of constraints: environmental, individual, and task. Now, we might not use all of these constraints, but just to be aware of the types of constraints is very important when we're session planning or going through each activity. Using constraints to afford different movement solutions and decisions, and you'll see kind of how we do that a little bit in some of the examples. Using constraints to see how we can go off script and add different things to the activities that we're doing. Prioritizing functional solutions versus fundamentals, which I think is very important. We at Franklin Basketball and Joe and I with our swoosh stuff, we're pretty big on not explicitly teaching the fundamentals, but rather giving them different solutions for possible situations that they might be in and coming up with multiple solutions. The constraints can consistently change, which I think is very important with younger age groups so they don't get bored. Giving them 2 minutes once they understand the game, and then kind of adding another constraint throughout. So there's consistently adding and changing. And then a famous quote from Alex Sarama here is, "As the coach, you are the architect." So there's really no limits to what you can do using constraints. So just move down. Some constraints that I use, and you'll see them in these videos, in this specific game is called Dribble to the Whistle, which is can be a warm-up game, it can be a shooting game, whatever you want it to be. And in this case, we've got kids in pairs and buddies, and they can dribble around the area. We've got our half court set up here, so they can dribble anywhere in the half court, their teammates running around with them. However, the constraints are the whistle will cue certain movements. So 1 whistle is a jump stop, 2 whistles is a pivot, and 3 whistles is a shot. Now, you could change these to whatever you want them to be. If you don't want to use a whistle, you could also clap or give verbal cues. Another constraint that we can do is change the pass type. So you'll see that in the video, I change the pass to a bounce pass. You could also do weak hand passing, one hand passing, whatever it is you really want to get from the group. You can kind of add those constraints as you go. Another cool one that I didn't do in this example here, but if their teammate who doesn't have a ball gets chest in front of them, then the player with the ball has to do either a counter or a jump stop or a pivot or some sort of a movement that you would use in a game if you were essentially cut off or if your defender gets in front. Another constraint is you can add a 3rd player in the middle and they can become like a defender. So it essentially just becomes piggy in the middle passing. So I'll just show you some examples here of Dribble to the Whistle. This is the base level 1, 2, 3 whistle options. So 1 whistle cued the jump stop, and then after the jump stop, they'd pass to their buddy so they can kind of have turns and get that passing throughout this as well.
Okay, now freeze. Hold your ball. This time, when you make a pass,
information I
it
gave.
has to be a
It wasn't an
bounce
explicit
pass to your
chest
buddy.
bounce pass, your hands have to go down. It was just perform a bounce pass to your buddy. And everyone does that differently, and the spacing is different, which I like about this activity. Another thing you can do is you can speed them up. So I would say they're kind of going at like a moderate speed here. However, this was at the beginning of the training, so they're probably still kind of getting a feel for it. Now, with the older kids, you can also challenge them to go fast and then go slow, mix up their speed movements. And then another thing you can do is add change of hands. So that could be another constraint, is every 3 or 4 dribbles, you must change hands.
Okay, freeze. This time, when you hear 2 whistles, jump stop and pivot and find where your buddy is and pass to your buddy.
Oh, so I just added the pivot with the 2 whistles. No explicit details around how to pivot, but rather just pivot to find where your buddy is and make that pass based on where they are.
2 whistles, pivot, find your buddy, and pass. Nice, Remy, great pivoting. What about? 3, go shoot a hoop.
And then finally, the third whistle cues a shot. So both players get to shoot a shot and they can keep going. So really unlimited things you can do for dribble to the whistle. This is something that I like to use, especially with the younger age groups. I coach all the way down to as young as some 4-year-olds come into our program. So I think having that like audio cue of the whistle is really important for them to kind of pick up what to do first. Then, like I said, you can kind of change how you cue them. Another example of constraints and how I use them in this specific example, we've got what we call random reps. So random reps is essentially just a finishing game, I guess, a finishing activity. But what I like about it is there's no long lines. These kids don't have to wait forever to have their turn. There's no explicit movement pattern. We kind of give them the option to finish however they like within the realms of what kind of shot we're trying to get. So you'll see how I use constraints here, like adding a crossover at the beginning before they perform their shot. And you could also add finishing with different feet, different hands. Now, as you can see in the video before I start it, we're still in the half court and there's 3 hoops set up and there's about 10 to 12 kids. So using the concept of scanning is something very important, especially with the younger kids, is on their way to perform their layup, just kind of identifying where the other kids are. And as you heard me ask them earlier, try to find where space is and go to a hoop where there's less people. So this one here was just must perform 2 crossovers before they go into whatever layup option they want. No explicit detail around how to perform the layup or what kind of crossovers to do. The players are just figuring that out and being creative.
New rule. This time, when you do your layup, it has to be off 2 feet.
Also, we added the constraint of a 2-foot finish. This wasn't explicitly taught. It was just told that they had to finish on 2 feet. And as you can see, they're figuring it out.
Show me, William.
Cool. Now here, there's this little kid here. His name's William, and as you can see, he did a really good jump stop on his way in to perform the shot. However, he forgot the dribble. So I pull him to the side here, and I use a concept that we use called keep and add. And I just give him some feedback around some things he can keep and what he can add to make his layup a little better. He goes off and does a dribble, forgets the jump stop, but in the process of getting there, he didn't travel, so I'm rewarding that. Cool, so another constraint I added was now the kids have to perform a layup, like an extended layup with one hand outside their body. Now, we called this a scoop layup just so they could relate to it a little bit better. I called it an ice cream scoop, as you can hear me saying. Now, no perfect technique on how to perform this. It was just try to scoop the ball into the hoop like a scoop layup. Some of them are trying it out. Some of them are going back to what they were doing before, but the constraint was there as just a guide for them to kind of learn a new finishing option. Now, there's really unlimited things you could do within your random reps. You could add a constraint that they must pivot. You could add a constraint that they've got a crossover on their way to the hoop, so it's more of a counter move. There's really no limits to how you can use your constraints within this activity, but this is something that we really like to use to teach finishing outside of one-on-ones and live games. So